Hi, I'm John,
I'm Andrew.
and this is Agree to Disagree. So,
Yep.
you wanted to talk about
this wonderful episode that we brought upon ourselves.
you wanted to talk about the boy who lived in a cabinet under the stairs.
I did, as a matter of fact. Also, don't mind the random noises of Stefan moving kegs
Yes, we are coming to
and
you
potentially
live.
injuring himself.
We're coming to you live from the back room of Hi-Fi Brewing.
Fucking
Yes.
hey, I did something to twist my back. It just fucking hurts.
No.
I mean, I'm hoping the painkillers I have will kick in, but it's like lift up the keg, twist.
So, if you hear a bit of screaming in the background, ladies and gentlemen, that is Stefan potentially dying and us.
more so, screaming more so than usual.
Yeah, and hopefully us actually going to help him and ditching the podcast for a little bit, so we make sure that our friend lives through the day.
That couldn't have been timed more perfectly.
No, seriously, that was excellent. Intro show. Anyway, yeah. So I have serious problems with the Harry Potter series that I feel like this would be a perfect time to address that sort of thing, because obviously this is a show where we do that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So, what do we want to start out with here, buddy?
Well, okay, so first of all, have we come to a decision about how, okay, so this is a big topic because we're not talking about a video game,
No.
we're not talking about a movie.
So keep in mind, listeners, by the way, also, the way John and I record these, we don't talk about the topic that we talk about at the end of the episode. We want to keep it a complete surprise. So John and I have literally discussed nothing until the two of us sat down right now to record this episode. So we're both still pretty baffled by last week's ending on, like, how to figure out what we're going to do for any of this.
And don't worry, folks, at the end of this episode, I'm going to get him good.
I have a feeling this is going to be super goddamn frustrating. I don't know what we're going to do on figuring out how to quantify this. I was actually thinking what we can do, since it is the holiday season, we probably both have a lot more time around. I'm not saying whole series. I'm saying I think at the end what we do is we decide on bookmark moments in the series that help to define the whole franchise that we then go back and watch.
Okay.
So it'd be saying, okay, Philosopher's Stone, Goblet of Fire, and, like, Order of Phoenix. Okay, watch those.
I mean,
read those, come back, then we record one.
I mean, I'd be down to do the Deathly Hallows, but that'd be a commitment to 4.
I am fine with that. If you're willing to do it, I can do it.
Oh, yeah, no problem. Okay, so... Done. All right, let's...
So 147?
147.
Got it. Okay, so my issues with the Harry Potter franchise, so let me make this very clear, too. I have read every single one of the books.
Same.
All of them, I want to say at least once, and I know for a fact the first 4 twice. And I have seen every movie up to number 6. I never saw number 5. I saw 1 through 4 and 6.
Okay.
So I'm a little bit different on my viewing of the films, but I am guaranteed I have done all the reading. I am walking in this with the majority of my homework done.
All right, cool. I have also read through the entire series at least twice. I've seen all the movies, and I saw the movies when they came out, and I've subsequently watched them since then.
So I've seen the original Philosopher's Stone probably about 4 times. I watched it a lot when I was younger. Probably seen Chamber of Secret twice, and I've definitely seen Goblet of Fire like 4 times.
Okay.
So I'm a little bit more sporadic on my individual viewings for that, and a lot of those I didn't really see when they came out. I wasn't like desperate to go to the theaters for it.
Goblet of Fire, of course, being the first movie where Ron gets real mad at Harry.
Yep. Goblet of Fire being the first part of the series that I felt real from the aspect of, like, a plot standpoint. I think that's why I want to do Goblet of Fire as one of our benchmark moments.
All right.
Because Goblet of Fire, I think, is the moment in the series where things get real.
Okay, so
that's whatever. But let's get into the actual discussion.
Let's start with some background about the Harry Potter franchise.
Sure.
For anyone who's listening who might not know what
Harry
Potter
Potter
is.
You know, like the one person of our 4 listeners.
Hey, you never know.
Yeah, fair enough. All right. So factoids.
Okay, so Harry Potter, for the record, I didn't do any preliminary research.
No, I didn't either. I feel like I know this series well enough, but...
Harry Potter was a series written by J.K. Rowling, who wanted to write a series of books directed at children.
Yep. The progenitor of what we know as the current young adult kind of idea of modern fiction develops from this series.
And it's a story about a boy who grows up with his aunt and uncle and his cousin, and he has a real crappy life.
Yep. lives underneath a staircase. His uncle and aunt are both terrible to him. His cousin's awful to him. Basically just lives his life slowly devolving into a cave troll of a human being. And then one day, after dealing with a lot of owls attempting to visit their family and a bunch of other magical disturbances, they head out into the middle of nowhere, a tower in the middle of nowhere on an island, if I remember correctly, to try and isolate themselves from this. And then Hagrid, the giant, hunts him down and is like, "Oh, by the way, Harry, you're a wizard. Come with me. We're gonna whisk you away from your life." It's very fairy tale. Which is kind of nice.
It's that kind of dream that a lot of kids have. Where it's
totally.
Like maybe I'm something greater than this.
Maybe I'm something. It's the same philosophy that like your Luke Skywalkers have. The idea of like, oh, you have a greater destiny than the world that you live in.
But so we quickly find out that not only is Harry Potter a wizard, but he's also sort of like this culture's chosen one, or at least they believe him to be. Because when he was a baby, not even control of his own faculties,
he was able to fight the greatest dark wizard that has ever existed, and able to win due to magic that has yet to be understood by the actual magical community. And that dark wizard is now long dormant. They assume he's dead, but he's not actually dead, but we find that out later.
So all the good wizards think that he's the chosen one, and all the dark wizards also think he's the chosen one, but for different reasons.
Which kind of makes life a living hell for him, because the interesting, I mean, they talk about this later in the series, it's also, in that sense, a building from on of a child trying to come to terms with his own identity when his identity is defined by society, and trying to fit himself into that mold while also crafting himself his own individual personage.
So it turns out that the entire wizarding world coexists with what we would consider the normal world,
which is the Muggle world.
Yes, they refer to non-magic people as Muggles. They have quietly hidden away all of these parts of the wizarding world through dark alleyways and stuff, and hidden behind magic and up on top of mountains with powerful spells that no one will ever be able to break if they are also not a magic user.
Right. Ways of just shunting this entire society to the side and being like, we have our own individual one that exists.
It's a whole world that exists all around you and you have no idea it's there.
Precisely.
And that's, once again, a thing that really plays into like the dreams and hopes of little children. I don't know about you, when I was a little kid, I was always like peeking around corners and going through like you're always looking for that secret hidden doorway, you know?
Yeah. There's always more when you act, like, you as a child don't actually know that, like, that doesn't exist, but you always are hoping that, oh, there's this extra fantasy, there's something out there that I just haven't experienced it yet, and if I walk down the right alley at the right time and catch the right door, maybe I'll discover an entire new world. And Harry Potter very much plays into that sort of ideal thinking of children.
Abracadabra.
Addition from Stefan, everybody.
So Harry Potter.
Wait, that's what we're talking about? I'm not in this episode?
You can be in this You can be in this episode.
I gotta work the ball!
Alright, he can't be in this episode. You can be in next week's episode. Anyway.
Alright, so not only does this whole wizarding world exist, but also, on top of that, for some reason, mostly because, for the sake of plot, everything seems to revolve around the main wizarding school in England.
Yes.
Which is Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry.
Yep. Giant castle built out in the middle of fuck-off nowhere, England.
It doesn't matter what's going on in London. At the end of the day, Hogwarts is the most important place in the entire wizarding world.
Please, don't get into talking about my problems before I get into talking about my problems. You're kind of answering my own questions here.
So, Harry Potter gets to school, makes some friends, makes some enemies, and then the books primarily revolve around his adventures year to year in school.
Yeah, it's him living his life amongst the Hogwarts community and existing as a child, then a young adult, then a teenager, and also finally, by the end of it, just a straight-up adult amongst this wizarding community.
Also kind of dealing with the kind of like Mary-Kate, Ashley Olsen kind of thing, where it's like, he's famous, but not because of anything that really was by choice.
Yeah, more a situation that kind of demanded this of him, and now he's thrown into the spotlight because that's just how it ended up, and him coming back brings about great repercussions amongst the magic community. I feel like we properly defined our terms at this point.
Yeah, so that is in a nutshell the plot of Harry Potter.
Yeah.
Oh, we did forget one thing. Throughout the series, we realize that the Dark Lord isn't actually dead.
Not at all.
He's just super weak, and he keeps finding ways to come back, and it comes down to a prophecy. And Harry Potter...
Because it always does.
Of course it does. Because Harry Potter needs to kill the Dark Lord.
Because he's the only one who can, because turns out he's actually... Is he the final Horcrux? I can never remember.
He is, in fact, the chosen one on accident because Voldemort accidentally...
Left part of his soul.
He accidentally makes Harry Potter a Horcrux.
Which, for those of our listeners who did not make it that far in the series, Horcruxes are things made by dark wizards to be able to put part of their soul in them so that they survive through death.
Yes.
So Voldemort has 7 of them, so when he died, he didn't actually die, he just, went, lowered his power. And
like a snake shedding its skin.
Which is actually a perfect analogy for a guy who has no nose and talks like a snake.
Yes.
Yeah.
Now we've completely covered the plot.
Terms have been defined, so... Why don't you hit me with questions? Because I feel like I hit you with the surprise ending last episode, and I feel like that'd be fair that we do a back and forth, and then we'll talk about it after next week.
Okay, so let's start off with the big the big question here. Mm-hmm. Like, what is, if you were to boil down the big thing that you hate about Harry Potter? What is like the big overarching issue that you take with it?
I would put it down as a few things, but let's start with the primary thing in that to put it bluntly, the fan community.
I just kind of dropped a safe.
To put it bluntly, the fan community.
Oh God, yeah.
The mass of wave of nostalgia that has happened recently in modern entertainment media and modern fiction, in modern everything involving movies and video games and books, just drives me up a goddamn wall. As someone who is also a producer of fiction myself in the form of a writer, it is always frustrating to see this love, this overwhelming love for the nostalgic and for what we loved when we were kids, and not recognizing the inherent flaws that existed in those ideas in the first place. And it's that community not recognizing that there are problems and really weird, problematic sort of issues in the original series that can turn someone off from caring about it as much as that group does. So I have multiple problems with this, but fan community is a big way to start. Second of all, it's probably my least favorite interpretation of magic in fiction.
Really?
I find wands frustrating.
Well, yeah.
On a very high level.
We'll get back to that.
Sure. I find... Well, also, and obviously our viewers don't see this, but as someone who is Indian, it is also very frustrating to look back and be like, I think the reason I didn't like the series all that much is no one is Indian. And, I mean, as someone who openly likes Heroes for the reason that there is someone on the cast who was my race, and, that was a good connection to me when I was watching it, being like, Mohinder, I get the feel of that. And, that was part of the reason I watched Heroes. It is especially really frustrating that when watching the movies later on in my life, realizing that every single main member of cast, every single major character, every single major supporting moment is driven by a character who is pale white and English.
Right.
And that's something that I don't think I was able to quantify as a kid, but now that I'm older, I'm able to kind of pin down that, that was slightly frustrating and a little bit of a weird anomaly that shouldn't exist.
The closest they get to anything is there I believe is one black kid in Gryffindor.
Yep.
And then there are the twins that are of Indian descent.
Yes, the Patels.
But they don't really play any role whatsoever, other than just being some two girls that Harry Potter might think are attractive.
Indian side characters. And then there's Cho Chang as well, who comes up later on in the series, who she actually plays a major role and is a non-white person of color.
But at the end of the day, the people who save the world are three whiteys. Yeah.
From bloodlines that produce wizards because they're white. You see why this is getting weird now?
Yeah, that's true. Okay, yeah, you make a really good point that none of the founding fathers of Hogwarts are non-white.
They're all white, and the idea of magic being passed down through bloodline lineages of white people is also kind of terrifying when you start. I feel like my problem with Harry Potter is, and let me put it this way, is that when and this is why the fan community frustrates me so much, is that when you start to put weight on it, and when you start to put actual thought into the ideas behind it, the whole house of cards comes straight tumbling down.
This house of cards has no foundation!
The second you put any sort of thought into it, the whole thing collapses internally, and you begin to realize all the logical loopholes and all the weird implications of the things that they're talking about, and it becomes super strange very quickly.
No, I got to admit, that is a rock solid reason to take umbrage with this franchise.
Nice reference to a professor there. That was good.
Well, I got my moments.
Well, but no, yeah, that's just one of those things that always, I think, did bug me, but not nearly as much. But now that I'm older looking back, I'm able to look at it with nostalgia and recognize, yeah, it's still a decently written series about, like, a kind of a cool idea. But, yeah, when you start to put weight on these concepts of blood lineages of white people that run these large communities that all exist side by side with humanity and, like, help run the world, it gets a lot of really strange sort of ideas into your head about what some of this stuff was.
Can we take a sidebar here for a second?
Oh yeah, no, go for it.
I want to talk about the race thing a little bit more.
Sure.
Because as you may remember, within the past year or two, there was a stage production of Harry Potter.
Harry Potter and the Cursed Child.
That got a lot of press, but not for the right reason.
No.
Tell me why.
It got a lot of press because they decided to make Hermione a African English actor. Yeah. I was about to say African American. I'm like, technically that's not the right term because she's British.
They had a black Hermione.
Yes, they did.
And the fan community
freaked out.
Hermione's not black.
And the funny thing is, it took J.K. Rowling coming out and saying, no, guys, I never described her race in the book. You're all writing yourself in there for everyone to realize, oh crap, she did never describe that. And yeah, who the heck is to decide? And I will take author's precedent over fan community in that regard. When it's like, no, she can be whatever she wants, man. We never concretely said anything. All we said, brown hair, freckles. Boom. And that was kind of fantastic. That was one of those moments where it was definitely a very good moment for the series, where I definitely saw a lot more people branching out and found that a lot better. That yes, we are getting that diversity on the cast rather than the three main characters being all white and all from that area of England. We're finally getting out. We're finally doing something different, and that was great. I was super happy to see that.
So we've got your issue with the fan community.
Yes.
And we've got your issue with the fact that the basis in which the film worlds exist,
yes,
everyone is super white.
Yes.
There's very little diversity.
Yes.
And I mean, those are both very solid reasons to take issue with a franchise.
I will also say, so point three, and this is one that I think you'd want to save till later, but let's just do it now. The wand discussion.
The wand discussion.
Let us speak on wands. Why are you a fan of it? I'll hit you with the reverse.
I will. No, actually. So the thing. All right. I am a fan of the idea of the wand, which is the wand chooses the wizard, and like the higher level kind of thing. And then
the idea that you have your own almost familiar through which your spells work.
Yeah,
that's cool.
It's not just like a stick that you have. It is a
thing. You're not just like Gandalf with a staff.
Right. It is a thing that you're supposed to build a communion with. It's something that you're supposed to. But the problem I have with it, because I'm not letting them get out of this for free, is that they hinted at all this deep lore at the end of the fucking series.
Yes.
They go through the entire series.
They talk about it in book 1 and book 7, and then never again. Yeah. Like, that is it.
And then it's sort of like, I mean, okay, so I understand that for the bulk of the series, we're experiencing the world from the perspective of Harry Potter. A person who is not really known for being a good student.
No, and which is actually kind of nice. I actually like that from his character reason, where he's not this perfect Mary Sue sort of figure.
So because he's not a good student, it would make sense, and since
that he throughout the
course of his school years, he goes on these adventures that really detract from him being in class properly and learning at this
all the time. He basically derails his education to just randomly Indiana Jones his way through some shit.
I mean, for the record, most of it's not his fault.
Oh no, not at all. I mean,
but then it would make sense that he doesn't pick up on the lore until he actually leaves school.
If I remember correctly, quickly, there's
hides
actually
out in the wilderness.
There's a great moment in I want to say book 5 where he has a conversation with Umbridge and Professor McGonagall being like, "What do you want to do?" And he's like, "Ah," and genuinely has like a 16-year-old's reaction to that, being like, "I have no idea, because no one has told me anything because I've been fighting for my life for like 3 years now. I don't know what's happening." Like, it was.
So what do you want to do, Harry? Survive.
Like, seriously, that's what it comes down to. Like, I'm getting hunted by the Wizard World equivalent of Sauron, and no one's talking about it, and no one's helping me.
It's really more like an aggressive KKK.
Yeah.
It basically is.
I also take
purity of blood.
To steal
Jesus
Christ. Right? And also, to steal your phrase from earlier, I take umbrage with the Death Eaters. Oh, so bad.
Oh, yeah.
They are just wizarding KKK.
Yes.
There's no sense of... And I think that's why those books infuriated me. They're
a combination of, like, wizarding white supremacists.
Yeah.
And also people who are kind of, like, shitty enough that they're too afraid of their own lives to say anything against this person who might kill them otherwise.
Yeah, they're objectively bad people who are also just, like, very bad at their jobs.
Yes.
But no, one thing that I do take...
But they're rich!
Oh, God. Actually, so my problem with wands, and this was something I realized recently, when I was having this conversation with a buddy of mine, why I'm like, I don't like the Harry Potter series. We had this literal exact conversation over way more booze. But we were having this conversation, and I came to a realization about the wands that was super frustrating to me. So, describe to me Ron's wand for the first 2 books. Because this is a known entity in the Harry Potter universe.
Okay, so it's been a while. The only thing I can remember about Ron's wand is that it was a hand. His wand was a hand.
It was a hand-me-down.
Was it Chuck's?
I want to say it was one of his older brothers that was handed down to him.
It was handed down to him, yes. And it was in the...
Which ruins your communion idea right there in the first place, yes. But let's continue onwards.
Well, there's enough to be said about Weasleys and communion anyway. But, so it never worked quite right for him.
Yes.
Which is
communion
a point.
Makes total fucking sense. That's a good point, yeah.
And then he breaks it.
Yes. So why do the Weasleys not just buy a new wand?
Because they're poor.
So what does that imply about the wizarding world?
That it is super classist. That's the word I'm looking for.
See?
It's a very classist community.
Yep. Because
also the Weasleys are also what would be considered a pure blood family.
Yep.
But the fact that they don't have any real issues with non-magic people, the Muggles, they don't have any issues with that. Yep. They don't have any problems. So they are the poorest of the pure blood families.
So are we going to talk about how that makes weird racist, classist implications? Because let's talk about that.
Let's talk.
From an actual standpoint, like, that's pretty messed up that the person who can cast the best spells has to be able to also afford the best wand. Ollivanders isn't cheap. If I remember correctly, Harry throws a solid sack of gold at the guy to get his Phoenix wand, which implies that that thing could have not even had communion with Harry in the first place. It could have just been, I'm going to sell the rich kid who is naive and doesn't know what the shit he's doing the most expensive wand, because goddammit, he'll pay for it. Which, that's also kind of messed up. Like the fact is, Ron is casting on an objectively terrible wand that was handed to him by an older brother and is also objectively bad at magic because his wand is bad. Meaning that your only semblance of any sort of education in magic is based on how much money you can shell out. Shit is a pyramid scheme of a society. Like... Right. That's pretty messed up, actually.
Definitely.
So that's another thing I take umbrage with, is the fact that the society is super classist, and I don't think a lot of people realize that in the fan community. When you break it down, it's kind of really messed up.
It's super classist, and it also makes little remarks about people, like, for instance, who handles all the money in the Harry Potter universe.
If I remember correctly, goblins or gremlins?
Little goblin troll creatures.
Oh, that's not a mention. That's not a dig against Jews. I don't know what you're talking about.
Like, there's just all... Like, they even make a quote about it, like no one's better with money than them or something like that.
Fuck, I just realized that. Oh my god, that's really screwed up. Gringotts is run by former Jewish stereotypes. Oh my god. And maybe, okay, admittedly, because our audience is probably wondering this too, we might be reading too much into this.
We
A
are.
lot of people are going to make the argument that, oh, you're just looking too much into, like, a fantasy world franchise, because really, when you start digging, like, Tolkien's books are super racist too,
Well, yeah.
because the orcs only came about because, what was it, Melkor did, like, weird blood breeding internally things with elves to make orcs, and, like, that's screwed up. Like, there are a lot of things in any fantasy universe that when you squint at it the right way...
You can dig into C.S. Lewis if you want to.
Oh, yeah, there are, like, most fantasy is pretty messed up in certain regards.
Voyage of the Dawn Treader. They go onto this island where there are these...
Don't tell me it's an island of, like, native people.
It's an island... No, not in that way, no.
Thank God.
It's an island of dwarves who've been turned invisible because the wizard who was in charge of them didn't like... They were incredibly dumb.
Mm-hmm.
He punished them by transforming their form into this other form.
Okay.
That's like a monopod kind of creature that they all bounce around and have these boat-shaped feet. And they are embarrassed by the way they look, so they sneak into his tower, find his wizarding book, and turn themselves invisible so that they don't have to look at themselves. And then when they break the spell, because they've decided after being turned invisible that it's real hard to live while you're invisible.
Yes, I would imagine.
When they break the spell, then it's sort of like, but they look so much happier. Like, they look funnier this way, don't you think? It's
that's
like,
wow.
Yeah, but that's not what they're supposed to look like.
Okay.
You're Mr. Wizard, sir. I'd like to talk to you for a second about consent.
No, but I fully admit that this is me potentially overanalyzing a fantasy series, but my argument against that is these reasons are things that I cannot get past. It is barring me from enjoying the series as much as some of the other people that I know. It is my, and also not just from the standpoint of the wands as a social justice thing. I also just don't like the usage of wands. When it comes down to magic, I have always considered the best forms of magic in any fantasy universe to be like a conjuring of just like the energy of like the world around you and like being able to just form that with your bare hands. My favorite version of magic is I play MTG, I play Magic the Gathering. That is my favorite interpretation of magic. The idea that, okay, we're just gonna sap the land for a little bit and channel this red mana into a lightning bolt and just fire that at you. Like, that is the way cooler conceptual idea for me. That resonates with me more, and it also comes across as a lot more liberating. Once again, if we're going to argue the poor versus rich classist angle, it's better to do that in that sort of context, because then anybody has the ability to just be like, tapping the land, gathering the energy I need, and throwing it back at something. Like, that's much more freeing, and I find that when I write, I like that idea far more. It's liberating to the characters, and it's liberating to the world.
I don't disagree with you.
Sure.
I will make the argument that the wand itself, because they show time and time again in this wizarding world that you can cast magic without the wand. It's just the wand is sort of more of a focusing element. But that being said, I do agree with you on the level that it's so much. It means so much more when you're actually drawing the energy up from Earth or from other elements. Or you could be like in another version of magic where you have a Merlin type character who he's not a wizard because he was like, hey, guess what? You're a wizard. It was, he spent his entire life learning and researching,
studying,
honing his craft.
Yep.
Which is why you have the image of the long bearded wizard.
Which is why you don't have random, 16-year-olds being able to take down some of the most dark wizards on the face of the wizarding world.
Right, which is why you leave that to John Constantine, because he's a massive dick.
Well, yes, and also, I do love me some Hellblazer.
Yeah, well, I was just thinking about this. We're talking about Harry Potter. I'm like, oh, it needs more Grant Morrison. And then I'm like, oh my god, Grant Morrison's Harry Potter.
Oh, that'd be amazing! I would read that in a heartbeat! And then you actually have a John Constantine cameo being like, hey kid, so about these whole packs with demons that you've been making, need it to stop.
But there's
Ghost Rider just shows up.
I was just thinking about that. I was walking through. I'm like, oh man, Grant Morrison's Harry Potter. That'd be a graphic novel trip.
Oh.
I mean, the man is already absolutely insane. Yeah. Like Grant Morrison's Illuminati. I think it's basically chaos magic versus the Knights Templar. like Nazi
weird
fucking
weird
wizards.
aside, since I think we probably need to get back on topic, but last aside is that have either of you read League of Extraordinary Gentlemen Century?
No, I've not. I've heard really good things about it, though.
Okay, I kind of don't want to reveal it, but Harry Potter shows up in potentially what is the most amazing cameo possible because Century deals with like all the characters from the new century.
Andrew, you need another...
I'm good for the time being, man. They deal with all the new characters from the new century, the literary characters who would show up at their respective times. And at the end of the series, Harry Potter makes an amazing cameo. And just sidebar. No, but so those are a lot of my main points of why. And it's not really. Let me put it this way: it's not I hate the series,
no,
but it's just I can't get into it like I used to anymore because those problems are so obvious and glaring that I just can't see past them anymore.
And, you know, I agree with you completely on this. Mm-hmm. I will say, on the flip side, the books themselves were very liberating for a lot of kids.
Oh, totally. I'm included in that, by the way. Yeah, definitely.
Like, there's a reason I read through the books multiple times. Mm-hmm. Because I started out watching the movies, and I was like,
yeah,
everyone kept talking about how the books were better. So I started at Goblet of Fire. After the movie came out, mm-hmm. I read the 4th book just to compare it.
Right.
And then I read the 5th book, then the 6th,
and then the
7th came out, and then I started over on the first one and read through all of them again.
Okay, so for me, I actually have a weirder history with it, where it's I borrowed a buddy of mine's, my neighbor's copy of Sorcerer's Stone when it first came out, and I had the first couple chapters read to me, and I was like, because I was like 5, I was like, this is amazing, but I had to give him back the book. And then my mom and I got a new copy, and that was the last book she ever read to me. Because I got so impatient with the fact that we were moving so slowly that 6-year-old me was just like, screw it, I'm reading it myself. And 6-year-old me read it like a 6th, 7th grade level, just plowed through the rest of the book. I was just like, all right, next one. And then my aunt got me 2, 3, and 4 for Christmas that year, and did it all over again. It was great.
So can we agree that the first 2 movies are the shittiest? The 2 Chris Columbus ones?
So here's my argument with that. I would say the first one, I'm going to make the nostalgia argument, which probably will fall apart the second I try and watch it again this weekend for this episode. But the first one, I remember being genuinely good. And also surprisingly good even when I watched it again when I was like 15 and remembering that, like, oh yeah, child actors. And then watching it and actually enjoying every second of it. I could be entirely wrong, but I remember enjoying it.
I'm not saying they're not enjoyable. I'm saying of the entire group of them. Okay. Like, let's say Chris Columbus did all the movies. Yeah. I probably would have been perfectly okay with that.
Sure.
But then the third one,
Guillermo del Toro,
was directed by Guillermo del Toro.
Who just kind of showed up out of nowhere and was like, I'm making a Harry Potter movie.
I'm making a Harry Potter movie, and then we saw it was darker, and the castle felt more like an old castle rather than a medieval times set.
Fair enough. I do remember Azkaban being one of the definitely one of the most interesting ones of the originals. I do remember enjoying the crap out of Goblet of Fire. I remember loving that movie. The unfortunate circumstance with that one is that is also the first one where they had to replace Dumbledore, if I remember correctly.
I will say that the 4th one is the one where they cut a good balance. That just kind of they figured out how these movies were going to look and work, and then they just went from there.
Working in there, yeah.
For 5, 6, and 7.
Right. Don't get me wrong. Once again, like, despite the fact that I ended last week's episode saying I hate this series, I don't actually really hate this series. If my child were to grow up on the Harry Potter series, I'm not about to like disown them. If they didn't grow up on Star Wars, I would disown them. But like, that's a different story. that's a different story for another day.
Yes.
But I would say that it's something, and I always say this, it's a series that I fully recognize that I grew out of. It's a series that I recognize, because I remember...
And the series was designed for people to grow out of
I know that, and that's actually why it's kind of genius, where I do like it in that regard. I remember reading Deathly Hallows out of obligation, not out of wanting to read more of the series.
For me, it was a series that, like, you're supposed to start off... Like, I understand this. The way the books are written and the tones of the stories...
They're very simplistic in the beginning.
They're very much meant for young kids to be reading. And then by the time they get to the 7th book...
I did it at age 6.
by the time you get to the 7th book, It's supposed to be like, all right, I like reading. I'm going to read some real books now.
Yeah.
Now, real books, that's a harsh term for me.
But you know, I know what you mean.
It's supposed to help spark a joy of reading that you move on to other things.
And in that regard, it's actually pretty great for me because I went on to read some amazing nonsense that I should not have gotten a hold of at that age. I read fantasy 600-page space operas at like age 10. No, I really shouldn't have read that involved a lot of horrifying things that 10-year-old me should not have been exposed to. It's like when a buddy of mine told me that he read the first Game of Thrones, Song of Ice and Fire, at the age of like 12, and he was like, "Yeah, I probably shouldn't have done that."
I don't know. 10-year-old me was playing violent video games and watching rated R movies.
10-year-old me was watching a lot of Toonami and playing a lot of GoldenEye.
Yeah, I was watching a lot of Total Recall and playing a lot of Duke Nukem.
See, there we go. Oh, wow. All right. Duke Nukem 3D. Nice.
Anyway, can we to kind of close up here, let's take a moment and let's at least bring up J.K. Rowling.
Yes.
A person who started with just this idea for a book, and it became a whole series. It became a phenomenon. She made a ton of money. She was the richest person in England. And now the only reason she's not the richest person in England is because she's such a philanthropist.
And I will say, that is the one truly shining star of the whole thing. Don't get me wrong, the series, I still have nostalgia for it. I just fully recognize that it's no longer anywhere near what I enjoy fiction-wise. But J.K. Rowling is a human being that I am so... You know when you have those moments where you're like, I'm so happy this person got money. Yeah. Like that's the moment where I'm like, yeah, she worked her ass off, wrote an amazing series, and a bunch of editors told her no, and she was like, fuck it, I'm finding someone, and was so confident. And especially, I will say this as someone who is a writer themselves, that level of dedication is something I can look at from an inspirational sense and fully appreciate everything that she did. That is pure and utter dedication to her craft, and then taking that money and giving it back to the community. That is wonderful, and I absolutely adore that about her.
All right, so I think with that...
Yeah, so we'll go Sorcerer's Stone.
Sorcerer's Stone.
Goblet of Fire, and Deathly Hallows.
Sounds good to me.
I think that's fair.
Yes, we'll watch all those.
Yes.
I don't know if we'll be able to make it back next week.
It depends on your schedule, or because I think I'm going to be in the area, but I don't know what we're going to do. So this actually works because it's going to be a longer amount of material that we need to put ourselves through anyway.
So for the listeners at home, we'll see you in a few minutes.
Yep.
Hi, this is Future John just cutting in to let you know that we, in fact, did do all the recording, but because of the lengthy episodes, I have chopped it up into 2 episodes. It seemed to fit with the theme of Harry Potter. So we'll see you next week with another episode and the conclusion of Agree to Disagree, talking Harry Potter.